that this wound began to spread in his body. And Abu Lahab ended up dying from the strike of a female in Arabia. And when it came towards burying Abu Lahab, his sons Utbah and Utaybah, do you think they went to bury their father? They looked at their father's body because the wound and the disease had spread so far. They were looking at their father's body and they were like, we don't want to get infected from what this man has. So what we'll do to bury him, one of them said, let's just pick up some stones, we'll keep throwing it at him until there'll be enough stones to gather on top of him. Imagine that. All these years you are the arch enemy of Rasulullah, you end up dying with your own sons throwing stones at you. Until there were enough stones to cover his body, they said, now we've covered our dad's body and we've buried him. Therefore, all these years of Abu Lahab fighting Rasulullah, Rasulullah would continuously try to come near him, yet to no avail. Abu Lahab would eventually cut his relations with Rasulullah, and that's why the second part of analysis asked the question that Abu Lahab is from the line of Ibrahim. The followers of Ahlul Bayt say that Imamat continued in the line of Ibrahim. And that if it's a pure line, how comes Rasulullah had an uncle who was an oppressor? We didn't say every one of the descendants of Ibrahim is necessarily pure. We said that the lineage of leadership will remain where? Listen to the verse. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. قال إني جاعلك للناس إماما قال ومن ذريتي قال لا ينال أحد الظالمين. What did Nabi Ibrahim, what did Allah say to him? I am making you an imam for the people. Nabi Ibrahim said, Ya Allah, how about my offspring? When I die, will this imamat continue? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, beautiful reply. My covenant will not reach the unjust. What does that mean? That means in Ibrahim's line there will be unjust people. Just because Abu Lahab's the uncle of Rasulullah does not mean that the whole line is pure. No. But the line where the Risala continues will be in the hands of pure people. Understand the point? Not everybody in the line of Ibrahim is necessarily a believer. But where the Risala of Imama will be in the line of pure people. That's why, put aside Abu Lahab, who was the uncle of Rasulullah who continued the line of Ibrahim? Abu Talib alayhi salam. Imam al-Sadiq says Abu Talib is the last of the disciples of Jesus, son of Mary. Please understand this very important point. Abu Talib is the last of the disciples of Jesus, son of Mary. In which idea? In the idea that Abu Talib was the man who carried the knowledge of the original Bible. Because you know there are many academics, they say that how do we know Muhammad actually kept monotheism and understood the books that came before him? How do we know he had reference to the original Bible and the original Torah? That when he's speaking to the Arabians, he says, I know the Bible and I know the Torah. The reference is Abu Talib. And that's why the school of Ahlul Bayt holds on to Abu Talib. Why? Any other school in Islam can't hold on, especially when you say Abu Talib died as a kafir. You can't hold on to that idea. Whereas the school of Ahlul Bayt says, no, Abu Talib is not just a mu'min. Abu Talib is the last of the awsiya of Nabi Isa alayhi salam. Meaning that Rasulullah's line from Ibrahim, that pure line continued not through Abu Lahab, continued through Abu Talib, and then Abu Talib's son would eventually marry Rasulullah's daughter. Therefore you find on the second level that the line continues through Abu Talib. On the third level, an important question arises. Is this the only uncle in the Quran who showed disrespect towards his nephew? No. Because before Rasulullah there was another prophet who had an uncle who was difficult with him. Which prophet? Ibrahim alayhi salam. Even though the Quran says, إِذْ قَالَ لِأَبِيهِ, many of you have read it, it says he said to his ab. The translation always says he said to his father. It wasn't his father. His father had passed away. He was brought up by his uncle. His uncle, unfortunately, had a job. What was it? He used to carve the idols for the idol worshippers. This uncle, imagine, you've got an uncle who's an idol worshipper. Would you show him disrespect or no? Look at Nabi Ibrahim. Nabi Ibrahim shows him a great amount of tolerance, a great amount of respect, that when this uncle finds out that Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam is disputing about idol worship, this uncle, do you know what he says to Nabi Ibrahim? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. قَالَ رَاهِبٌ أَنْتَ عَنِ الْآلِهَةِ يَا إِبْرَاهِيمُ لَإِنْ لَمْ تَنْتَهِ لَأَرْجُمَنَّكَ. Are you trying to make people leave my idol worshipping? If you don't stop, I will stone you to death. I want you to look at the impeccable reply of Nabi Ibrahim. Do you know what he replied? قَالَ سَلَامٌ عَلَيْكَ سَأَسْتَغْفِرْ لَكَ رَبِّي. Look at this line. Your uncle is telling you abusively that if you don't stop in your way, I will stone you to death. Whereas Ibrahim replies to him by saying what? Oh my uncle, peace be upon you. I will ask my Lord to forgive you. The question arises, then why did Nabi Ibrahim cut his relations with the uncle at the end? If in Islam you're meant to maintain your relations, why did Ibrahim cut the relations? Because the only time you can cut relations with your womb relatives is if they are open enemies towards Allah and His Prophet. That's it. Please understand this line. Qat' ar-Rahim can only occur with a member of the family who's an open enemy of Allah and His Prophet. Someone came to me. I want to ask you a question. What is it? They said, so I can't cut my relations with my cousin who's not religious? That's the first group of people. There's one group of people who say, what's wrong? My cousin's not religious. I want to cut relations. You can't cut relations with your cousin if they're not religious. You have to maintain relations with them if they're not religious. Someone will say, why? Because maybe through your actions, those people may change their ways. Your cousin may not be religious, not because they want to be rude or arrogant, but maybe they haven't had the access to the sources which you've had. Maybe they haven't heard the lectures you heard. Maybe they haven't been in an environment which you've been in. How many of us have cousins in our home countries who are less religious than us, even though the countries are religious? We have cousins in our home countries who are less religious than us, but the country is called an Islamic country. We, who are living in the Western world, in some cases, are more religious than our cousins who are living in the Eastern world. Why? When you have a cousin who's not religious, you can't cut relations with them. Why? Tell them what you've heard, because they might not have heard it. Tell them what you've read, they may not have read it. Tell them what you've seen, they may not have seen it. I tell you, how many of our friends, when they go back to their countries, they're told by their cousins, so which music do you listen to? I don't listen to music. But you're living in the UK and you don't listen to music. You see that they're in the Eastern world and they're dying for what's here. And we're in the Western world and we're dying for what's there. The idea is that sometimes when you have a cousin who's not that religious, some people say, I want to cut my relations. No, you can't. Your exemplar may change their lives. Umar bin Abdul Aziz. When you read his life, it's an unbelievable life. You know who his dad was? Abdul Aziz ibn Marwan ibn al-Hakam. You know who his uncle was? Abdul Malik ibn Marwan ibn al-Hakam. In other words, he's in the very hub of Bani Umayyah. The very hub of Bani Umayyah. The whole of the Marwanid line is through him. Umar bin Abdul Aziz, his cousins weren't religious. Did he cut ties with them? Did he say, because my cousins aren't religious, that's it, I don't speak to them anymore? On the contrary, his example led some of his cousins to wonder, what type of mentality does this man have? Because he had seen his father-in-law, because Abdul Malik bin Marwan is not just his uncle, he's his father-in-law. Abdul Malik's daughter Fatima is married to Umar bin Abdul Aziz. He saw Abdul Malik bin Marwan living the most luxurious life, the most lavish life. He saw him taking the money of the people. He didn't break his relations with them, but he showed them, my uncle, you may be related to me, you're not that religious. I'm not going to cut my relation. But look at my lifestyle compared to yours, for example. How? Ammar bin Abdul Aziz one day was near the Umayyad palace. His wife Fatima was right next to him. When his wife Fatima was next to him, he was sweeping the floor. Umayyad Khalifa sweeping the floor. I don't know if these words have ever come together in history. He was sweeping the floor. When he was sweeping the floor, this lady had come to see his wife Fatima. She entered the palace, she saw Fatima without her hijab. She said to her, Fatima, you're without your hijab. I said, what's happening here? Your hijab is meant to be here to cover you. She said, but cover from whom? She said, that servant there, you can't have your hair showing in front of servants. She said, so that's my husband, Umar bin Abdul Aziz. She looked at him, she said, look where Khilafah has gone. There used to be a day when 300 servants would sweep the floor for Abdul Malik when he'd walk. And now his own son-in-law and nephew sweeps the floor by himself. Then on another occasion, Umar bin Abdul Aziz looked at the Umayyad mosque. He said, why are there so many luxurious and rich treasures here when there are people in the Islamic world who are poor? He didn't cut his relation with cousins. All he said was, these are my principles, these are yours. You are still my cousins, and I still have time for you, but don't you think we should live a life different from the one we're living? That's why when he became Khalifa, Umar bin Abdul Aziz was Khalifa for only 2.5 years until he was poisoned. And when he became Khalifa, do you know the first thing he said when he became Khalifa? This astounded his cousins. He said, no